well, you saw in our last election cycle, Trump and his supporters wanting to do absolutely everything to make sure that he, was still president, even after, we had the election and we had, and so on and so forth, you know, just that not wanting to let go,
Right. So not wanting the king, the regime, and everything that's associated with the king to die. Because the king
Right.
is trying to prevent its own death, right? Because they know that
Mhm.
but you can't give rise to anything new unless there is an actual death that occurs. So this is a really interesting also theme and topic in Jung, and talking about how the death of the king gives rise to a new regime. And you can't have a new regime without the death that comes first, and it's the death of the ego, right? So the ego has to release. Last year during the summer, I was part of a Jung book study group for a little while. And we were looking primarily, we're doing sort of the shadow. And so we talked a lot about what was happening. And we talked a lot about this theme here with the death of the king and seeing this sort of dying process. And that's so painful because you see it's a process, right? And the more resistance there is to it, the more ego that's involved, the more painful that process is. And we talked a little bit about let go last week, or last time we met, about how this idea of unless you let go, you'll be dragged, right? And so when that ego is resisting and resisting and resisting, there is that sense of being dragged, and sort of it's an abusive process almost, I would say.
Well, so then at that point it becomes self-abusive because you're the one that's not releasing.
Exactly. Right. And it's such a tricky place, right? I mean, because it's that tension between the ego as it's related to the emperor / king versus the sort of release of ego or egolessness that the fool embodies. That's an interesting tension to me. Yeah. It's so funny because when I was reading, I read both 78 Degrees and I read Tarot Wisdom, and then I read another book that I have by Elliot Adams, and it is called Fearless Tarot. Elliot Adam, and it's called Fearless Tarot. And I think of all the cards that we've read, it seems like how many different ways can you slice death, right? Can you look at death? And it's been, I think, the simplest in some ways for me in terms of understanding the concepts around death, right? So it doesn't feel particularly esoterically profound necessarily the way some of the other cards seem to be, which is not to say that it's not profound, right? But it doesn't seem to be as maybe esoterically complex. And yet it's very complex. So it's just a really interesting card. It's like, okay, because how many different ways can you sort of define death? I kind of like that she says, I think her approach is like, let's look at history and let's honor the history of this card. And the sort of fairly modernish move away from the concept that it could represent an actual death. But certainly death, right, in some ways. And the way that we have, I think, sort of shifted the language a little bit, maybe to just soften the blow, right? Because of the ego and how it's involved in that. And certainly I think her advice about when you're reading cards for others, and you can portend, do you really want to share this directly, that boldly with someone?
You mean of a literal death?
Exactly. Because she doesn't rule out that it can suggest that, right?
Right. But I got softened so I only read the one book, and I got softened not because of the ego. I got softened if you get that there's a literal death involved.
Yeah.
Because of what they would have to go through. But I like how you said that, Denise, because if people are in their ego, including myself, you already know I'm going to resist you when you tell me something because I'm in my ego.
It's
So
true
I
for everything.
really like that. So it's really whether we're, either way you interpret it, softening is good.
Yeah,
One of the things that she points out, Pollock points out, is that death is particularly painful if one has not prepared for it through the experience of the hangman prior to it.
Right.
yeah,
So, if we're following this initiatory path,
right.
from the hangman, we have the hangman, which is the beginning of the initiatory process, and then the death is actually when we decide, okay, we're going to set aside the ego. We're going to set that aside. We're going to set aside the past, and then the next step after that would then be temperance or art, depending on which tradition you're looking at. But
What do you, temperance or art, did you
art,
say?
it's also called art. Yeah.
What's called art? I've never had a tarot
Temperance.
deck where it's called art.
Yeah. Yeah. In the Crowley deck, in the Crowley tradition, it is.
The name on it is art?
Is art. Yes. We'll
What
get
does
to the,
art, okay, I'll shut up. Okay.
yeah, yeah, we'll get to that next time we meet. But yes. Just like in the Crowley decks, strength is lust, which we saw back when we did strength. But one source I looked at a couple weeks ago said the death card is always painful. It's not, it's always going to be painful to some degree. There's always going to be,
Well, and I would kind of have to agree with that, Kurt,
Ew.
right?
I like that she gets into the whole thing about the whole shamanistic aspect of it, and how different cultures in different cultures, they make it a point to look at the to face the reality of the skull of the skeleton, and that the shaman, somehow in literally touches one's own bone or envisions one's own bone as bones or skeleton as a part of seeing the whole full. And I think that probably gets into the whole shadow.
You kind of interrupted yourself at the end. I was trying to hear that complete thought because that was nowhere in my reading. Can you kind of touch on
So
that?
in 78 Degrees of Wisdom, Pollock talks about how in different shamanistic traditions, there's a practice of either literally slicing off the face to feel the bone underneath the face, or somehow envision being able to see the skeleton within, and how that's somehow becoming in deeper touch with reality.
Like, you mean literally, if I'm
Literally.
with a shaman on a journey like I was a few weeks
Yeah.
ago, that he's going to have me cut open my face to touch my bone?
Nowadays, no, but
Well, but like,
Yeah.
yeah.
in some traditions in the past, yes, or somehow have you psychically see your skeleton within the body.
Right. So you have different kinds of ceremonies that will
Yeah.
enhance a kind of like death-like, some of the, peyote, for example, people get deathly ill with that. And experiencing this sort of pain and sickness that folks may want to just very well die from it, right? But then once you get past all of the sick that the actual peyote induces, then you get into that sort of those vision states, right? So I
Wonderful.
think that it's an interesting, that wisdom that comes from, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to die, but now I see all these cool things, or see those things, maybe even see my own skeleton, my own bone, which is really interesting because
What's the point of seeing your own, feeling or touching your own bone?
It's it's a death to the ego, because you're, it's an understanding or a realization that, you have this, that basically, if particularly vanity and such, if you're concerned about the way you look, or concerned about anything that's sort of perishable, underneath all that, you've got a skeleton, and in fact, your skeleton's going to be around far longer than any of the rest of your body. Skeleton can be around for hundreds of years,
Oh,
thousands,
yeah.
even, and depending on climate, thousands of years, whereas your flesh and everything else, that's gone, and
So if you
It
touch
reminds
your
me.
own bone, it's what, like giving you a sense of your mortality?
Yeah.
Or-
yeah,
She does
and
start all of her, in both books, she talks about just the fear of death,
Right.
the literal fear of death, right? This is really reminding me too of sort of the Dia de los Muertos and those traditions around
The-
death.
oh, we'll get
Uh,
there. That's in
yeah. Is that in there?
that's in the
Awesome.
cards.
Good, good, good.
Yeah.
And then there is a folk saint, Santísima Muerte, which is
Mhm.
also about sort of understanding, death comes to us all, right? So death is the great equalizer, more so than anything.
Well,
So
and actually, in the Vedic tradition and Vaishnavism, the idea, one of Krishna's forms is death, and
mhm,
and the idea is that if you don't meet Krishna in life, everyone meets Krishna upon death,
yes,
right?
yeah,
And so death is actually seen as God.
yeah.
Um, you know,
There's so yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I guess the fear of death, of course, is the ego, right? That it's painful, that there may be a sort of painful. I have a colleague in philosophy department who really asks us to question, right? He questions his students, of course. I think he does this in a great, he gets them to think about it because he's really interested in how we as a culture understand death, right? And what are our practices? What do we believe philosophically about death? All that kind of stuff. And so, students often will say things along the lines of, well, we know that we say things when somebody has passed away, really to kind of calm ourselves, like, now they're not suffering any longer. And so he comes back and he says, well, how do you know this? How do you know that they're not suffering? How do you know that death isn't worse than life? Right. So, and I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, well, there's even more anxiousness about not wanting to die, right? Because there may be this kind of underneath, but his point is well taken, right? Is that we don't know, but we say things to sort of assuage and to calm our own loss. But I think that there needs to be, because we don't know what we don't know, right? So all of the kind of worry and resistance about death. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, who has always basically said that he's always known that he's going to die young. That he would be shocked if he reached 65. For him, that's young.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so we started talking about it, and we did eventually talk about sort of the fear of, it isn't so much the fear of death, but it's the what leads up to, right? Some folks have, what leads up to that particular point.
oh
And
yeah,
So, and on the converse of that, I look at it as the fear of what's on the other side of that.
Yeah.
well, and I've talked to, I mean, professors who are older, and who, my mentor professors, for example, a couple of them older, single, have always been single, and their answer is, I've got a gun,
Yeah.
and when the, and rather than suffer and suffer and suffer, you know and and our society has a certain view about that, but other societies have very different views about
Yeah.
I
that.
agree with the professors.
You
I
know,
have I think I've mentioned my friend John, who is a Presbyterian minister. And he had a really interesting, like he started seminary a couple of times, and he has had for the first, probably 50 years of his life, his adult, his adult years at least, he has suffered from pretty severe depression, and he has had, suicidal ideology, and has purchased a gun and all of this kind of stuff. And so this is a man with deep faith. He calls it faithing, right? Because he believes that when you walk in faith, you are faithing. It's a verb, not a noun. So he really prefers that idea of it.
But Presbyterianism is sick. I mean, that's just going to, Presbyterianism is just going to breed more suicidal ideation. Like that's like the worst.
We used to go to a Presbyterian church for a while.
Presbyterianism is the root
He
problem.
was Methodist beforehand, and he's gone through a very, very, so
Calvinism is the root problem with America. It always has been.
Well, I think the two of you would have really fascinating conversations, because to know John is to know that he is the most sort of liberal Presbyterian out there.
He needs to join UCC because Calvinism is the root problem with America. Always has been.
Yeah. Well, I will. Well, this was he was a Methodist beforehand. His sister is a Methodist minister. So he comes from, and he has, again, a very interesting and challenging sort of family history. Mm-hmm. But his father essentially was schizophrenic, and so there was just some stuff. So anyway, he's managed to deal with this stuff. He had an experience where it was literally one of those come to, God on your knees. I don't understand. I'm desperate. And he calls it the night of the lightning bolt. And he shares this story with others. So for me to share this with you is not a violation of his privacy. So what happened is that he felt in that particular moment, there was such a dramatic shift or change in him, and that his depression has been gone. So there was a miracle healing that occurred at that point. His depression has been gone since then, and he hasn't had to have medication or anything like that. He's in his early 60s now. And so, I think that I have to cut back to the point that I was trying to make. I was telling you this story for a specific reason, and now I've forgotten the point of my story, people.
God, it doesn't only happen to me.
I was like, I was going to tell you the point of the story. It'll come back to me. When it comes back to me, I'll finish the story.
Calvinism is the root problem of the whole world.
No.
But no, that's not, not necessarily. But a gun. Okay.
Conversation.
So this idea of having a gun and having attempt and having this. So now I know.
Okay.
So part of essentially what he was saying is that he deeply believes that God has grace for suicides.
I deeply believe that too.
I believe that as well.
Well,
right?
the Catholic Church
the
Catholic Church even believes that now.
Yeah, they didn't.
They didn't until very, very recently. But, but they have.
Imagine all those poor folks before that.
Yeah.
Shit, right. Those. But this idea that we live in a culture where there's deep shame around one choosing to end life.
Now, metaphysically, suicide's not a good idea, because what happens metaphysically is essentially your subtle body gets ripped. It's a sudden rip in the subtle body, and it's not good. Like it when you carry on in your next life, you essentially start with a deficit. Yeah. I mean, it's not the end, quote unquote, but it causes significant injury.
Yeah. But then that's part of the learning, right?
Yeah.
If there's grace for that.
Yeah.
If one really embraces the notion of grace.
And then you have the whole scenario of, for example, Toni Morrison's Beloved. The whole thing in that is that she kills her child, and that's supposed to be the most horrible thing in the world, which it is. However, she does it because she doesn't want her child to be a slave. right? She doesn't want a
Wanna
child to
talk
be a
about
slave.
her.
She doesn't want her child to be raped. She doesn't want her child to live the life that she has lived.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know that, you know, within 5 years there's going to be, you know, the emancipation and everything like that. I mean, she doesn't, you know, and so, but so it becomes extremely complicated and yeah.
I watched the film Nomad. Can you hear her? She is demanding right now.
You watch the
Um,
film, what? I can't hear you.
She muted so she can take care of the puppy.
But Oski's a boy, and she said, "Can you hear her?"
She's got two puppies over there. One's a
How does
girl.
she have two puppies?
She's sitting.
Oh,
And the girl is very big. Bigger than Oski. Angel, I hope you're not bored.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
okay. Thank you guys. Sorry about that. So I watched Nomadland last night, and Nomadland won Best Film in the Academy Award and this year. And I don't know if you guys know, have you seen it, heard about it, anything?
Mm-mm.
is it on Netflix?
It's not on Netflix. I went ahead and I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy it. And the reason I bought the film, I bought it on YouTube, is that it's really about the culture. They're a group of people, retiree age, 60, 70, folks in their 50s, 60s, 70s. About 2009, people were doing this individually anyway, but really after the recession, or, you know, right at that point, not after, but during that recession, folks were realizing that they had been worked all their lives and essentially the retirement wasn't going to be able to cover
Yeah.
anything. And so these folks set out and started living in vans and, you know, in their cars.
Was this a
And
documentary or was this because I
the
think
book Nomad, I think it's called Nomads. And I don't know, it's based on a nonfiction.
yeah, because the book came up in Daily Deals a while back on Kindle.
Yeah,
So it
it's
sounds
based on the
familiar.
book. The book
Yeah.
is nonfiction, but when they wrote it, they wrote a character in it that wasn't in it
Mhm.
before, and that's the character that Frances McDormand plays, who won an Academy Award for Best Actress because she was
Cool.
amazing and she had very little dialogue. It was all nuanced in her face and her body. I mean, she's just really a master.
I probably love that. It sounds like something I'd really like.
It's an amazing film, and part of it captures the desperation, right? The deep desperation of what do I do in my final years? I don't have enough money to live the way I would normally live. And that, the way that we are prescribed to live in sort of normal society. And these were literally folks who, there's a significant line in the film, and it's a short scene between Frances McDormand's character Fern and a teenager. One of the teenagers, she was a substitute teacher. One of the jobs she had was as a substitute teacher, and one of her former students, asked her. She says, "Hey, Mom says that you're homeless," and Fern says, "Not homeless, houseless."
Well,
There's a difference, right?
there
You
is.
know? And so this is the different way. I mean, talk about a way of having a kind of grace. But this group of people, they sort of travel. What they do is they follow the weather, right? So they're in Arizona and they're on BML lands. Did I
What's
get
that?
that right?
BML lands.
Bureau of Land Management lands, which are federally owned
So
lands.
national parks and
They're
yeah.
national parks, essentially.
Like Joshua Tree.
They're not really technically national parks though, are they? Or are they? I don't really know. All I know is that they're owned by the federal government. They're managed by the federal government, and that you can camp on them, but you end up having to do something called boondocking, which means there are no facilities, right? So there's no electricity, there's no water, potable water, whatever. You've got to kind of take care of all of that on your own unless you're near a body of water. And that's what they do because you don't have to, the fee is very minimal to go camping on these lands. It's very, very minimal. It's very, very affordable. And what they do is they just travel and park out and camp out in BML lands, and they do it together as a kind of
A community.
as a community. They have become a community, and
So
these
they are the home.
they are the home.
Yep.
They are the community, and they never say, they say we'll see you down the road is sort of how they greet each other when they're moving on to their next place.
But I would assume they caravan.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do it singularly, right? I mean, there's some groups that kind of travel together, but I think that this is the thing that they didn't talk about in the film directly, but it's alluded to throughout the whole film is how does one live out our last years towards our death? So I woke up today in this weird mood, and I'm like, and I think it's really in a mood that I couldn't really name. I can't really tell you what mood it is. I'm calling it a weird mood. But I really think it's because of, given what we were going to talk about today, the death card, and also what that whole kind of, I think the reason why it touched so many people who've seen this film is because of this thing, right? The thing that we don't talk about. We don't talk about those final years as we're moving towards death. Primarily, I mean, we don't really talk about folks after a certain age. We vilify age. We have created a kind of culture that
Right.
worships youth.
Apparently it's costs double or more if you're over 30 on Tinder to be
I'm
be on
serious,
Tinder.
Denise. I looked at
So,
it,
you know,
so if you're under 30, it's $10. If you're 30 or anything over 30, it's $20 for the base thing, and anything else is double what it is to a 29-year-old. And I'm like,
what is that? I guess they assume that people that are over 30 have more money. Is that kind of,
no, I forget. I started to read an article about it, and I just said that was a bunch of shite, and I gave up. So it's not about having more money. It's some type of it's something else. It's deeper than just they have more money.
and you know, in the Bhagavad Purana, it talks about there are these dimensions of reality, these you know, where there are these beings that basically refuse to accept that they age, like they do anything and everything to make themselves look younger and everything like that. And so basically they live, you know, as if they're 20 something basically their entire lives, and then they die, you know. But what happens, actually, that's all men. See, that's a secret to men right there. I'm gonna break it down. This is a secret to men. Every man, I don't care who he is, he still believes somewhere in his psyche that he is 20 years old and that he's capable of doing anything and everything that he was able to do when he was 20. Now, we all know that's crap, and we know that intellectually, but somewhere in the psyche of every man, he believes he is 20 years old.
Mhm.
See, the angel knows what I'm talking about. But we know, I mean, intellectually, we know we're not as virile as we were when we were 20. We know we don't have that, but somewhere, sure, I'll do that. I'll go move that. You know, I had my ex-father-in-law, he was trying to move refrigerators when he was like 65. I mean, you know, but no, we don't like to deal with our own mortality or the mortality of those close to us. You know, like I tell Nut Nut, she's not allowed to die. She's Nut Nut is not allowed to,
You know,
and
it's a really interesting thing. I yeah, I don't know. It's this thing that's inevitable, yet we push against it all the time.
mhm.
Um,
And yeah, and
No, I'm done.
I was watching. This is my favorite piece of film, probably my favorite piece of film of all time. Uh, Would You Be My Neighbor? The documentary about Fred Rogers,
mhm.
and the which is now on HBO. It's back on HBO. HBO Go or whatever it's called now, HBO Max. It's back on HBO Max now. But there's that part where he's getting ready to die. I mean, he's getting very, very sick and he knows he's going to die. And it's very shortly before he goes into a coma. And his wife, he asks his wife, do you think that I'm a sheep? And he's referencing a biblical passage where, it talks about separating the goats from the sheep, you know, and his wife says, Fred, if anyone was a sheep, surely you're one, you know. But I think that
Oh,
that's
he's trying to figure out if he's going to heaven or what?
yes, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And I think that's it too, is like, in Catholicism and most Christian theology, they call it fundamental option. It's like what has been the sum total of one's life, and we talked about earlier, what card was it? The judgment, where the weighing the heart against the feather,
Yeah.
and and so it's that thing too. It's like, what what have we done in this life, and what are we leaving behind, and what are we taking with us now? My experience with working with people who have crossed over, and it's granted it's limited, but um my experience is that they take the good, they take the intense experiences, which in the people that I've dealt with who have been good were good, and so they clothe themselves with that. It's like their shroud for passing over are those experiences. Those experiences are like a sheath that they clothe themselves in.
And those experiences were them being good?
Well, in the sense of the deep experiences that they remember, that define their lives, you know like in other words, I don't think that when somebody crosses over, they sweat the small stuff,
Right.
you know
So these
I-
sort of these life defining experiences,
yeah, yeah,
right? You
yeah.
know,
So,
here's an
so then
exercise.
what does that do to the people that have bad ones that are
So I don't, and
predominantly
again, I
bad?
don't, but so again, I don't know if there's some sort of reconciliation with that, you know. Um, Now, some people, if you read their accounts of near-death experiences and all this kind of stuff, when they go before the quote unquote judgment, you know, what they come to realize is that even if they have done something that was quote unquote terrible, they look at they're able to see it in a multidimensional way. And so they see their own responsibility in it, but they also see all the other threads of responsibility in it. So it becomes a very different thing, that,
In context rather than
yeah,
just
yeah,
one.
yeah,
Now, there was a yeah, I mean, it's this idea that, certain behaviors, when somebody arrives at a certain decision and enacts a certain behavior, that's not ever disconnected fully from the culture that they're living in. how they were raised, what they understand, their value set, what was the set of circumstances. You put anybody in the right set of circumstances and we will all become criminal,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we
I was
will. I mean, I believe that about everyone. But
Well,
you
and
put somebody in a really in a set of circumstances where they're well supported, they receive this sort of love, unconditional love. They are supported when they're challenged. They're also supported familial as well as, family and friends and all that kind of stuff. And you'll see, not that they don't have any hardship, there's hardship there as well, but because they have that support and that core sense of deep understanding that they themselves are not, despite the fact that we're all flawed, we're still deeply loved, right? That's the unconditional piece, right?
Mhm.
You put people in those kinds of circumstances and watch them flourish. We
Yeah.
see it with our students all the time, don't we? If you had the opportunity
Oh.
to see students and you see the kind of thing. So there's a way, if we could see that, well, how cool would that be if we could see the whole thing? It would probably lift our hearts or make us cry, right? Because when you see all of the all, it helps you to put it in deep perspective. So it's pretty profound if that's what happens, if one at their passing, at their death, who has maybe lived a life where they've created a tremendous amount of that their actions have created others pain, right? Or have created a circumstance where people are responding with pain, right? Emotional pain. Because there I was going to mention one thing really quickly. There's a coaching exercise that I've seen, like life coaching exercise that I've seen. I've seen it journaling. I've seen it in lots of different places. But it's one of those sort of, imagine yourself at 80 or at 90 or at some advanced age. What would you like to be known for at that age? So how would you like to be, sort of the retrospect of your life? Do you want to be known as this kind of, and so what it is like backwards design, right?
That's kind of depressing right now to me.
Well, but
I'm already, I'm
you have to
well
imagine
into that.
Yeah, but you have to imagine yourself at an advanced age. So at 80, if you're 50, that's 30 years.
Mhm.
And the thing about it is that I sit back and I'm like, I've been doing this, right? I mean, watching Nomad Land, preparing for today's, session, today's meeting. I'm sitting back, and so I'm imagining this, right? I'm leaning into it a little bit more, and I'm like, yeah, but 80 is just right around the corner. I'm like, 80 is 25 years away, right? I mean,
Well,
whether
yeah,
I
but you think like I just screwed up 40 years of my life.
Yeah, but I don't know that we can think about it that way always, right? I mean, because you won't do anything, right? You won't move forward,
Right.
right?
I mean, that's the idea of it's understood that it's a mercy that we don't remember our past lives, because if we did, we would be paralyzed with how much misery we've caused.
That's why we only get snippets.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's too much. It's too much to bear for in one lifetime.
Mhm.
Oh, hold on a second. She's been snack spoiled. She's been treat spoiled. So now currently when she's with me, I have to treat spoil her too. I'll be right back.
What I was saying, the depressing part, Kurt, is that like I've made so many mistakes for over 40 years, and it's like
Join
I
the
might as well just throw life in the trash can. You know what I mean?
No. Your life is beautiful. Your spark of life is beautiful.
You said something to me earlier today about that my energy felt like sunshine today, and that really made my day. Thank you.
It's true.
Thank you for that.
It's very true.
CG, I don't think you recognize just how lovely your energy is.
And then the people that I wasted my time with going to see that rental house, which wasn't a waste of time because I got to see you, but
And that
the wife told me that I was so beautiful and this is coming from another woman, and normally you get compliments from men and not other women because women are catty. And that's, I'm saying in a stereotypic
Yeah.
generalization way.
Women treat each other like crap. I've seen it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that I was so beautiful, and so I kind of made a joking remark back. I mean, so I didn't practice my thank you.
So
And I said, well, if only I could convince my guy of that. And she looked at me and she said, oh, you already have, and he knows.
oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
You needed to hear
And
that.
then right after hearing that, you told me that I felt like sunshine today.
Yeah. That is, yeah. And she
So
was,
thank you.
of course, thank you. No, she was talking to you as she would a sister. So that was a sister moment. That was not a,
That's funny because yeah, okay, I'll tell you later. Yeah.
that was
that's
not
funny.
that was not a catty moment or something like that.
No.
That was a sister moment.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that those folks who come across our paths that way will share with us, what sometimes will reflect back to us what we need to hear. Right? I mean, in that moment, we sometimes just need that reassurance that we're seen, just to be seen, right? And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we
I
talk
had
about,
this,
yeah.
before the pandemic, and even since then, I'll go into a grocery store, and let's say the cashier is clearly the cashier is having a bad day. So I make it my goal that in those 5 minutes that I do whatever I can to help shift that person's energy
Oh, that's beautiful, Denise.
for the
And
better.
I have a dear friend of mine who is Caucasian,
Mhm.
but anytime she sees a little African American girl or a girl of color, little girl of color, she'll go up to them and tell them how beautiful they are.
Yeah.
And I mean, she means it very sincerely.
Yeah.
But it's probably they don't, those little girls don't get told by white people how beautiful they are.
Yeah.
Or maybe no one ever.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Yeah. So there's that, we were talking about that exercise and about the sort of retrospective of your life, and then sort of do some backwards design to help you. And I've done these kinds of things before. And I remember I came back identifying, and if you're working with a really good life coach, right, or going through some really good training, they'll move you through all the steps in the process, and I think it can be really helpful, right? So you sit back and you're like, if I'm fussy about somebody not reaching out to me because they haven't reached out to me in a long time, so like my brother for example, or something like that, I don't have to sit there and wait in my own sort of piss and vinegar about it. I can reach out to my brother. There's nothing keeping me from that.
Okay. So in this moment, you're teaching, I'm relearning, or however you want to put it. Yes, there is something keeping me from it, and it's my blanking ego.
Yeah.
Right?
We always, yeah. And that's the thing that I think every time we have that moment of like, I'm not going to do it because that's so-and-so, it's their turn.
Yeah.
and I
And
think
maybe-
we fear embarrassment too. I mean,
Right.
that's a big thing. It's like we feel like, yeah, we fear that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, keep us from doing that.
Because that hurts our ego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that all of these kinds of things, coming back to this idea of, a fear of death and how it motivates you a certain way sometimes to resist death, resist the idea or thinking about it. So I really do like the, I had to pull, it's really funny because I don't have any, I have Rider-Waite sort of RWS inspired decks, and then I have a lot that are just sort of not, but then I'm like, I have to go and pull one because when they were describing, the imagery,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I had to go because not even this deck all of them have fallen before the night, right? The night of death here.
Say that one more time. All of who has fallen?
All the four figures that are in the card that are in sort of the what we call more traditional representation, the Rider-Waite-Smith. There are four folks here, and this is this whole deck is very Rider-Waite-Smith. There are four figures here. And if you look, and I have another deck that has a little more traditional representation.
Are you saying, I'm trying to follow you. There's four figures in the card.
So there's death, here's one. There's the maiden, there's the child, and there's the king. And death is always upright. We see death upright in a horse typically. When we get into the gallery, we'll definitely see the progression through it. The maiden often is turning away, right? Is sort of in a demure kind of pose before death, but sort of like, you know, the ego is there, is still intact, right? And they're all representations of ego. We see often the priest, and I don't know that we have the priest in this one.
He has a crown on of some sort.
Well, the Hierophant, they're sort of referred to as the Hierophant. And usually the Hierophant is fallen on knees, sort of like acknowledging that I have a deep faith. I do believe that with death, that there is going to be a life after death, right? This is sort of interpreted in part that way. And so can face death in a way because there's such deep faith there that allows one to accept that death is here at the door, right? And it's going to get me through this kind of thing into this afterlife or whatever the belief is. And then you have the maiden who is like you having to turn away because there's ego. You can see the ego involved there. The king has to fall, right? Because king is pure evil, not evil, but ego,
yeah.
Right? Pure ego, right? This is the emperor. And then you have the child, which is an interesting, the way the child is understood or depicted here is often giving flowers to death. Right? Here's the gift of, and has a kind of innocence there.
Is this child, I can't really see, do they have flowers?
This child, that's a good, looking in my own camera here.
Okay, so the child is kind of not as turned away, but his head is shifted away.
Well, and this one is not as traditional.
Yeah, it's not as traditional, but it's, yeah.
But the child doesn't have that ego yet until adolescence, and that's not an adolescent child. So explain to me how the child is ego there.
I don't know
why the child is fallen.
Huh?
I don't know why they have the child as
okay.
or you know.
I would argue that children get ego much earlier than adolescents because I was a little asshole at by like, 4.
Yeah, I was gonna say we talked about in the book. That's what she talks about in the book as adolescents picking up the ego.
I would argue strongly against
your personality. A lot of your temperament is set. Like you're like
7.
So
by 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Your temperament. You're born with temperament, according to my friend she's a psychologist. So the psychology department's in my my department. So I talk about them, and we talk about personality and all that. I said I read that personality is set by 4, and they said it's not really set by 4. What you have, you're born with a temperament. You're going to be a fussy baby. You're going to be a gentle baby. You're going to be this. You're going to be that. And so temperament, they have difficult children. They're usually the fussier babies, right? So that temperament is already kind of set. Personality is always developing.
Even now?
Yes.
Now.
Yes, absolutely. And
then what is it that I remember from psychology about being done by 7? Is that our ego?
No, that may be like your baseline,
I remember something being set in stone by 7 years old in psychology.
I would argue that may not be the case now. There may be theories now that debunk that. Now, according to
you said it like by 4 or 5. What were you referring to? What were you referencing?
I was probably referring to the same thing that you were, but it would make more sense. It makes more sense that it's constantly evolving. I would say that, you know, probably if there's something traumatic that happens to you in that period of time, that's going to stick with you. Like I have I have a friend, for example, that had an incredibly, absolutely horrific experience happen to her at the age of 6. And it, you know, and she's had mental health issues her entire life.
Well, okay, talk to me about that after
You know,
study group, okay? Because I have something good to tell you on that.
and so, but in the Vedic understanding, they talk about that we're born with anartas, which are negative tendencies from our past lives, but they're in seed form when we're born, and that adolescence is about the time that those tendencies from our past lives come up.
They emerge.
Yeah, yeah. So
Angel, you still with us, hon?
Yes, I'm here.
Um,
uh, I've got a bunch of stuff going on this weekend, so I have to.
You have to what?
I that's a third thing going on this weekend that is happening that I've got to.
You caught me off guard. I don't know what you're referring to. You
Oh,
just said this out in the middle of nothing.
Oh no, I was typing on my phone. That's why I paused. That's why
Oh, because you got a bunch of stuff going on.
because I was typing. Yeah, I was typing on my phone.
We missed the typing part.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of ego, but yeah. So, and I didn't put this poem anywhere, but we should take a look at, and I'll put a link to it in the when I put the video up in the, you know, on our page. But Emily Dickinson's "Because I Could Not Stop for Death," that, see, and I wrote a whole piece on this,
I
right,
love that.
in
Yeah.
graduate school. She's basically, she does exactly what Rachel Pollack argues in her book, Body of the Goddess, that in fact Hades and Dionysus are the same deity. They're two different faces of the same deity. And she has this whole anthropological discussion as to why that could be, you know, based on archaeology and anthropology and stuff from Crete.
Isis
But
and
no,
Dionysus.
Dionysus and Hades,
Hades. Okay.
saying that they're the same being, they're the same deity, but that they're two faces of the same deity. And what this means is that if you take that to be, if you take that conjunction, that connection paradigm, if you take that paradigm, then Persephone was not abducted, right? She was essentially seduced and went into Hades, into Tartarus of her own free will, basically to be with her lover. She was not abducted, which is the traditional reading of that. And so there's all kinds of different implications there. But my argument is, with the Emily Dickinson poem, that's essential, that Emily Dickinson is essentially casting herself as a lover of death. And she's of course looking at death as a harbinger of sexuality, which Pollock gets into a little bit.
Little
Um,
bit.
but really, actually, she gets into it quite a bit when she talks about the scorpion and the eagle being
Well, she didn't get into it in tarot wisdom.
being emblems of death, because the scorpion, that's they're because those are both emblems of Scorpio, the sign. But the scorpion, which we're most familiar with, that is indicative of the ego. That's indicative of raw sexuality. That's indicative of trying to keep in that, trying to fight that release, right? The scorpion's tail is curled inward, and so on and so forth. Whereas the eagle will release that energy.
Eagle, like a bird?
Yes, correct. Like a bird. Will release that. You'll see in the cards. Will release that energy, and in so doing, will then soar above, soar into the spiritual realms, or as Pollock puts it, into the realms of awareness. Right.
So then let's talk while we're on this real quick about the difference, or explain how I can think about this right now, between release and Tantra.
So Tantra is about release. Because in Tantra, what ultimately is happening is you are it's an acknowledgement. With the baseline of Tantra is that with any relationship with any being that you have, whether it be sexual as we understand it typically or not, you're forming a child with that person.
Right.
You have a quote unquote tantric or magical child with that person.
Right.
So as a relationship grows, and so as you exchange more energy in that given relationship, that connection becomes stronger. So in tantric sexuality, it is, I mean, you're releasing energy and sharing energy with the other person with whom you're engaging in it with, and it
Right, but there's like, it's not an immediate thing.
Well, it is. I mean, you're not gonna. It's not like in Taoism, right? Whereas in Taoist sex magic, quote unquote, the whole point is for the male never to have an orgasm. That's
Right.
not with Tantra. That's not Tantra. Tantra is about the sharing of energy.
Okay, well, I misunderstood something earlier, but that's okay. We'll keep moving.
Well, I'm waiting for Denise to come back. I don't want to.
So I misunderstood something earlier when you were talking about orgasm. And I said something about, well, that's opposite of Tantra. And you said, yes, it is. And so that's where my mind is at on that topic. That's why I asked you this question.
Yeah, I mean, the Tantra would be about release as opposed to fighting the release. But Tantra would also be about release with a purpose, though, right?
And so where does that fit in with death?
Because death would be the release of the energy, would be the, and
whatever it is that we need to release. The
well,
job, the marriage, the whatever.
And it all, and with sexual release, though, it's about the release of that energy, right? It's not necessarily about the ego comes into this.
I'm trying to see how we're tying this to death. Can you please make that?
Well, we're tying, sex is tied to death in the West anyway, because in French, you know this, you speak French, right? Le petit mort. Oh, le petit mort is how they say orgasm in France. In French is the little death, right?
Oh yeah, I have heard that before.
Yeah. And so there is a sort of this inscrutable in Western consciousness connection with death and sexuality. I mean, you know, but I mean, getting back to like the skull image, you even see that like Kali has a necklace of skulls, you know, and the reason being is that the necklace of skulls represents egos, represents this ego being severed. Um,
Of herself?
not of herself, but of those who would fight her.
So I only pulled 2 death cards while we're waiting. I pulled the one from my new deck, the, what's
True
my new
Heart.
deck?
True Heart. Oh, wow, cool.
Love it. And so I'm in love with this deck. I'm in love, love, love. And I gilded the edges with gold paint.
That's cool.
And then I pulled, of course, the light seers, which is interpreted in an interesting way.
Yeah, we'll see that again. Yeah.
Okay. And those are the only 2 I pulled. Angel, did you pull any?
Yep.
What decks did you pull from?
Um, I think this one's like a Rider Waite one, and then the other one is the Deviant Moon.
Oh, I would love, Angel, like, I'm so glad you're with us. I would love if you would address that. Because I have that deck too, and it proves for me to be difficult to work with.
Yeah, it's like, it's sort of hard.
Do
For
you
me.
work with it on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's my favorite one. I mean,
Yeah, so I've
I
been
guess
wanting to
it's
get together
challenging.
with you on that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very challenging. So have you put together any thoughts on the death card?
Yeah. I mean,
We can't see you. Can you?
yeah, I was gonna turn this thing. Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Can you
Okay.
see it?
Yeah.
Say something, Angel, so you pop up big on the screen.
Okay, so this one is the Deviant Moon. And you see like right here, it's the child
Uh-huh.
and how it looks like he's wanting to go back into the womb of the mother, who's, I guess, death, I suppose. Yeah.
And it almost looks like she's trying to crush the child.
Yeah, she's like keeping them back. Yeah. Oh, and then it shows how she's pregnant too. So she's
Right.
about to give birth. So that would be like, that's where I take it as like rebirth.
Yep.
Because you can't go back. Death is an irreversible change. So you can never go back into the womb, right?
Right.
Kind of. That's what I'm picking up here in this as you're talking about it, Angel. Wow. Yeah.
And then this is the other one.
Mm-hmm. I have that deck.
Right.
Yeah. And that's more like a Rider Waite. Yeah. It's Rider Waite Smith.
What
Mhm.
deck is that, Angel?
I don't know. It was a gift. So yeah, I have no idea.
Did it come with a slim
It just-
booklet? Yes, I have that exact same deck.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And the cards themselves are kind of on the thin side.
Mm-hmm.
So if you shuffle them to, like, you get really excited. You may bend them. You got to be careful because yeah. I ended up taking that deck and combining it based on an inspiration from CJ about combining. We're talking about the Alley Men,
Huh?
you know, the Kickstarter deck that's been posted on the tarot group a couple times. and it's all these mismatched cards essentially. And I was like, I have this one that I, that very deck. And I said, and I have this other one that I haven't really, let me combine them and see what they're like, because one has an energy that's real. A lot of times, sometimes when I'm working with tarot, I get a really strong sort of energy presence with it, like, entity presence really. And one was more neutral. And the other one is called Cosmic Tarot. That one had a really strong pull to it. So there's a really strong whatever energy pull to it. And I said, what happens if I combine the two? And that, what it did, it is sort of neutralize it in a way that they're both workable. Does that make sense? So I was experimenting with it based on your suggestion, CJ. It was really it's kind of cool. I'm still working with it. I'm like, okay, this could be really cool.
Well, I love that because I haven't backed Alley Man, even though the idea is novel to me and I want it. Money's an issue, number one, first and foremost. But secondly, it's so many cards. And B, Kurt and I were talking, and like he said, he's not impressed with all the cards the guy chose or created. And I haven't seen every card, but I would have to say I probably would agree with that because, I don't like every card in every deck anyway.
Right.
So what I'm thinking now is instead of spending $45 on that, why can't I just, the decks that I'm in love with and that I already own, it's easy to separate them back out because of the back. So why don't I just combine decks? When I read, and if 2 death cards comes up, well, then we know we really need to address that.
Right.
Yeah, and some readers will do that. I've done that before.
Where I'm going to start with that, Kurt, is I'm going to start with that Book of Shadows.
I read.
That actually.
Yeah, that was what you were talking about, combining those 2 decks together.
Because they go together anyway.
And there's a spread in that book that uses both of them. Like you have to combine the deck. To do this one particular spread, it's like a huge spread. It's in the back of that book. That you do combine both.
So cool.
But you know what Alley Man has that our idea here doesn't have unless we do it strictly with Book of Shadows? He's made the deck from all these different decks and his artwork and then the other friends of his new artwork. So it combines all that. But what they've done is they've made all the cards the same size. So if I take the cards I pulled, it's going to be hard for me to shuffle them and draw cards intuitively the way I do because they're all mismatched sizes.
And you can also, I guess you could also just treat them separately. Sometimes you can read with 3 or 4. I've seen folks do it. They'll read with 3 or 4 tarot decks.
Right.
You're making me want to go get the Alley Man right now before it shuts down, unless it already.
I think it's got a day. I think it's a day. There's a day left.
I thought they closed. I thought it was done.
Or did they close it down today? Because I know
it might already be closed. I'll look right now.
I know it was coming pretty quick.
I don't really understand how Kickstarter works completely, but it was.
I know all about Kickstarter. I've spent way too much.
Well, I can tell you what it looked like. Can you overfund a project?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is what happened. I think they asked for this amount of money and they got
right.
Oh yeah, it's fully funded.
It's like 1 point something million. What do they do with the overage?
They print more decks or they give you extra shit. Yeah. Most of the projects that I back, they end up being like 1,000% funded or close to that,
I think this person ended up with a 1 point something million to back this project.
Unless
that is so freaking crazy, Denise.
And some people do scam on Kickstarter. Like you have to be,
that would suck.
Yeah. I have, in Kickstarter, they're, they have disclaimers on there that, this is not a Kickstarter, is not a pre-order. It's you're funding an art, you're funding a,
Well, there was one way I logged in before, or I got it before, that didn't make me, I'm clicking on this Kickstarter thing, but I guess I don't have an account or something, so it's not letting me see anything. But there was another way I got through that obstacle earlier by some other designer funding or crowd funding or something.
Running a Kickstarter well is almost like another job, like, you know, for the full time the whole time the Kickstarter is running. You know, if you expect to make a decent amount of money on it. No, I have acquaintances that have run several of them, and they're just, it's a very great way for independent creators of art and stuff like that to do their thing. Like, it's very reminiscent of back when, you know, artists had patrons, kind of, you know, it's kind of like that.
So you may or may not get the end product is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, but the thing is, yeah, you may not, and it may not fund. I mean, you could also do it, but usually now, people have done so much research before they put their Kickstarter up that they know whether it's going to fund or not. Like, they know what their fan base is, and they know, you know.
Maybe it's closed down, you guys, because I can't find a way to even get in. Like,
Oh, look.
there was another way. Something kept popping up on my Facebook about designer funding. It was not Kickstarter. It took you to Kickstarter, but it allowed me, without logging into Kickstarter, to say, yes, I want to back the project. And then it would probably take me to log in, but I don't have a login, is what I'm saying yet. So and I can't remember what it was called on Facebook, but it was like designer crowdfunding. I can't remember the name of it. And so I'm thinking maybe it's shut down already.
Yeah, I thought that I want to say it was yesterday was the last day.
It was today, but they had a
Oh, it's
certain
today.
time on it.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Are you logging into Kickstarter?
Me?
How do they spell Alley Man?
Alleyman.
Here it is. Yeah, it's done.
We can't get it.
Right, it's done.
So when they print all the extra decks with that extra money, are they going to be for sale?
Probably somewhere, but they're going to jack the price. That's what happens. You're always going to get the lowest price on Kickstarter, but you will probably be able to get it. You probably just have to pay $10 more or something.
Well, which would be equal to shipping, I guess.
Well, then that's before shipping. Like,
Well, yeah,
I mean,
but somebody
yeah.
will have it with free shipping. I guarantee you.
But yeah, I mean, but that's how they do. You're always going to get the lowest cost usually on Kickstarter, unless they just print way too many and they aren't able to sell them. But anyway, let's see what we got here. Okay. So I'll go ahead and share the cards we have. So this one, oh wait, can you see me? Yeah, you should be able to see.
I think the edge, well, I guess that's your whole screen. I don't think the edge is cut off yet.
No, it's not. So, but here you can clearly see, I mean, death has trampled over the emperor, and the child
Has the flowers.
is looking up and is offering death the flowers. And this reminds me of, you know, unless you be as one of the little children, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven.
Well, it also kind of reminds me of the crucifixion in a way.
Yes, it's supposed to, like, that's the so one of the things Pollock talks about is that the number 13. So and I didn't know this, I didn't realize this. I thought it was because of the Knights Templar. Knights Templar were essentially order to just to eradicate the Knights Templar came down on Friday the 13th.
October, yeah.
And so that's what I thought. That's what I thought it was. But no, the number 13 comes from Judas as the 13th man at the Last Supper.
Well, she didn't say that in Tarot Wisdom. She
But-
gave all of these examples of
But
13.
but it also the 13th man could either be seen as Judas, but it could also be seen as Jesus. So you can, and so that gets me back to the scorpion versus the eagle, you know, because Judas is clearly a scorpion, you know. In fact, his name, Iscariot, means assassin, right? You know, which whether there literally was a Judas or he was written into the story as the, you know, would-be assassin, right? But his name means assassin, or knife man. But anyway, and then you have Jesus, could also be seen as the 13th man on the other side, being the one who transcends the material.
She talked about other 13s too. And by the way, you guys, I don't know if y'all realize today is May 13th.
Yes, yeah. And here we have Robin Wood's death.
Mm,
I like that she includes a butterfly.
yes, that's the transformation piece.
Yeah,
Renewal.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I love the color contrasts here,
Uh-huh.
the white flower, the red of the emperor's cloak.
I wonder, do you know much like about trees and their meanings? Those look like birch trees in the back.
I did not look any of that up, but
No,
I'm
I
sure
didn't know if you just knew something because I
no,
don't, but
no, and that is something I can look up, but I don't.
Those are birch trees for sure.
Mhm.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
So the man and woman, I'm sorry, I missed it. In the other one at the crucifixion with the child offering flowers,
Mhm.
those are just more representations of ego? Like that's a family, obviously, or no?
Hold on, let me look at my notes here.
Birch tree was the center of the Beltane festival.
Oh.
So that's the sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's that little death. The king is rigid ego. Here it is. The king is rigid ego. And so
no, I
rigid
meant
that
in
when-
this card on the first card we looked at.
Yeah, that's what she's looking up. Yeah.
So yeah, the king equals rigid ego. And then the essentially when your ego is so rigid, then when life comes at you really hard, you've had some sort of trauma or some sort of anything that could cause a potential trauma, that it's very easy, it's possible that the ego could collapse. And possibly mental health issues could arise, right? So she's saying that ego is so rigid and so unbending and unwielding that the only way it will is if it breaks completely.
But I'm asking, do you see the child with the flowers? I'm talking about the very first card we looked at.
Yeah.
Right. So the child represents complete innocence and faces
No,
death.
I know. Yeah, I got that. But I'm talking about in this particular card, who is that man and woman?
The man is the Hierophant or the priest, because that's a
Mhm.
priest.
Mhm.
So he's not related
Mm-mm.
by blood to the woman
No.
and the child.
No.
Okay. Did y'all talk about them and when I walked off for a second or no?
Yeah. Denise already talked about. all
Okay,
of
but
this, so you
okay,
know.
yeah. No, Denise, I got it all in the book. That's good.
Okay.
Okay.
So birch tree also, from what I just read, is protective in Celtic, in the Celtic mythology. So the idea, I guess, is that death is not to be feared.
Mm.
That's interesting. You're protected in that. And then look at the butterfly for the
Right.
rebirth.
Right.
Mhm.
It's the
That
rebirth.
transition, that transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what deck is that? Is that Robin Woods?
That's Robin Wood.
I'm in love with that deck too.
Yeah, she is very, very Wiccan.
Mhm.
She is very well known for fantasy art, particularly D&D art in the 90s.
Robin Wood?
Yeah, yeah. And then here we have La Santa
love it.
Muerte.
Mhm.
And what deck is that?
That's the Dark Goddess.
The Dark Goddess deck. I love that.
That's a very, do you have that, Denise?
I don't have it.
It's
expensive.
it's $34. They had to reorder it on Amazon. They're out, but they said they'll have it back in stock soon.
It's a beautiful deck.
It is.
I mean,
And Santa Muerte is very influential here in San Antonio. There was a drag queen version of her at Halloween at my work a couple years ago. I got my picture taken with La Santa Muerte.
Wednesday. That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
Well, she has 3 aspects. She has the white, red, and the black.
So the one that the version of her I got my picture taken with was the black.
That's the black.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the
that
black
is-
version.
Go
She's
ahead.
like a triple goddess, right? So the dark is the most intense. She's got interesting because she's not really associated with like Dia de los Muertos in a direct sense. She's a folk saint.
And her devotees offer her whiskey, right?
That's one of the things they
I'm
offer.
pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, they offer, but part of it, she's sort of a patron saint of for those folks who feel the most outcast in culture and society.
Well, that would be, a former Pentecostal Mexican drag queen,
Well, actually,
dressing up as her would be appropriate.
all LGBTQIA.
Yeah. So it would
So
be,
they
be
really, there's a real devotion there to Santa Muerte. So there is I did some research on her just because there was an anthropologist who has been doing a lot of research lately on Santa Muerte, and I thought originally I thought she was tied to Dia de los Muertos, but she's not. She's not tied. You would think, here you have a death
Yeah.
saint, but she's not tied to that tradition.
So,
I
and
actually-
I'm just learning about her right now. So y'all, I've
Mhm.
lived here my whole life and I don't know anything about her.
So I have a friend actually in Dallas who follows a Greek, the Greco-Roman pantheon. He and his husband follow the Greco-Roman pantheon, but they have an altar to Santa Muerte,
Mhm.
and yeah.
You want to know something that's really interesting because, at different points, since I moved back to San Antonio, she's really sort of like, and when I say appeared to me, I don't mean like in an apparition or anything like that, but all of a sudden she's everywhere. And you're like, all of a sudden I'm like, are you trying to get my attention? What's going on? And then I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to talk to you, Mother Death. I'm not really sure yet if I'm really ready to do that. And then I'm like, and then, I'll go about and whatever, la, 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 la. And about 5 years later, again, the same thing.
And she has her own deck too. There's the Santa Muerte Tarot.
Mm-hmm.
I
Also,
think
Yeah, she
that's
has
the one
that.
I want.
Yeah.
Amber has it.
It's beautiful. Okay, so can we talk about all these symbols in the card?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually did not read up on her, so I don't.
So is that what do you call it? The scythe or whatever, that instead of, at first I thought it was the moon,
Yeah.
but it's the knife, the scythe, the machete. I don't know what it called.
But
think
I
it's
also
the
think it's a crescent moon as
And
well,
I
right?
also think it's
So,
a crescent moon. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's really both.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. I really think it's both.
And then the world, the 3 roses, does the beads or anything, the white and yellow and the straight and wavy on her head, like
Like her corona, her crown,
Mhm.
her corona.
Is there anything specific? The world in her hand, the 3 roses, is that triple goddess?
Well, I would have to guess, right? This is one of those decks too, probably, that doesn't have, like, the esoterica is not as obvious.
Right.
Right.
But I'm looking at the beads around her neck, perhaps as kind of like prayer beads.
Uh-huh.
There's a kind of prayer bead associated with that. And I'm looking at the world in that sense where, it's dwarfed in her hand. She's got the
Uh-huh.
world in her hand, and that's because the power that she wields, right? I mean, death is a very powerful energy and a powerful force. And that, the roses themselves are about a kind of life, right? That there is this kind of life that's also represented there.
Like maybe the rebirth.
Possibly,
Well,
a kind of
yeah,
rebirth, or at least that there is a kind of, I mean, the rose is also very devotional to Our Lady of Guadalupe, for example.
right. That's what I
And
was going to mention, is that, yeah, the rose is,
and I have seen versions of like La Muerte with Our Lady of Guadalupe. The only thing that looks different is that her face she is in skeleton form, right? So that may be a kind of an allusion to that kind of aspect of her identity, right? Because she is a triple, she is a triple goddess in a sense, right? She's got that triple identity. So I'm attributing those 3 different roses perhaps to her three different aspects.
well, and if you think about the rose as being sacred
Mhm.
to the Virgin Mary or Mary Magdalene, and there's a lot of discussion as to, Mary Magdalene was Virgin Mary probably supplanted Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was probably the original revered mother in Christianity, or the revered goddess or woman figure in Christianity. But the idea that motherhood or womanhood is so close to death. You know, I used to
How many
bring
women
up,
have died in childbirth?
yeah, I used to bring up to my students. I said, if you don't, to male students, I would look at them. I say, if you're afraid of menstruation, you're afraid of death. If you wince at the discussion of female cycles, then you're afraid of death. I said that's just, you know but that was back 20 plus years ago, when would have women students say, I'm not a feminist, but that was always, I'm not a feminist, but, like, well, do you believe in equal work for equal pay? Yes. Well, then you're a feminist. Until, and but no, I mean, but yeah, I mean, menstruation, childbirth, um um the potentiality of death during childbirth, the potentiality of infant mortality, you know all of that, women are so close to life and death, in a way that men, I mean, nowadays, men can go in the delivery room and men can be a part of the procedure and everything, but for so long, particularly in America, they, it was unheard of for a man to be in the delivery room or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking at the world in her hand too, and how Pollock said, and Denise, you mentioned earlier, how death is the great equalizer. So I kind of am putting that in conjunction with this world that's small in her hand, as well as that death of ego thing, because when the ego dies, it seems to me that it would follow that connection with the material versus spiritual, that material part is shrunken to that, where the spiritual takes over when you have that death of ego. I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there.
Mhm.
And so I see the world representing the material.
The material ego.
So it's so decreased with that death.
Mhm.
And then if I follow with the prayer beads, then there's got to be that faith that you were talking about with the Hierophant that falls on his knees at the time of death. In that deep faith, therefore there's no fear.
Yeah.
I actually like that in this death card over here. This is not a Hierophant. This is a monk,
Yeah.
right? And so, you've already got the casting off of the ego
Mm-hmm.
taking place in the fact that this is a friar. This is not a Hierophant.
Right.
So, I kind of like that.
The sense of humility and a humbleness
Yeah.
and how it's depicted there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea, that interpretation of this, of the ego represented in the world, and it having a kind of diminutive. It's now diminutive, especially in her presence. And it also reminds me of the Two of Wands card with the world, and the idea that you get to that place of complacency where you feel as if your world has shrunk to a point of meh kind of thing, where the ego is like no longer inspired or interested or that kind of thing. And so yeah, I think that that's a very nice way to think about that.
And
like
I
it.
also like, just from on a juxtapositional point here, like the roses, like the roses are the same size as the world,
Mhm.
right? And so it's like these roses, which are feminine and powerful and everything, they're actually, they overtake the world in a way.
Yeah, because actually that's perfect. That was the word I was thinking while you were saying that, was overtake, because they actually are just a hint larger than that world.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So that was perfect, Kurt. I love that. That's a beautiful card, and I can't remember if I like the other cards in that deck, but I love that card.
You've liked some of them.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Wow.
So here we have
Yeah.
we have Hades himself,
Mhm.
and of course, the child's off. These are the three figures.
And is that the triple goddess there?
I mean, I don't know if, it could be. I forget what they.
But are they all women? No, I guess the
No.
one in the
No,
back
one of
is a
them's a man. One of them's a man.
Okay.
But
So I'm struggling. Can y'all talk to Denise maybe? Is that a family, a family unit there?
I don't think so. I don't
It's
think so.
People, okay.
Yeah, it's so even though this deck, it's the mythic tarot, even though it uses Greek mythology as an overlay, a lot of the images in the cards are very, very traditional, like pre Waite-Smith traditional. And so you do have the three figures. This is the river Styx
Mhm.
here.
The river what?
River Styx. The idea is when you cross into the underworld, you have to cross the river Styx.
STYX?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you cross the river Styx to get to
That's the name of the river.
yeah,
Right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
mean there's sticks in the river.
No.
The Styx River.
The Styx River.
Is that how Styx got its name?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I forget what the word Styx means in Greek, but it's not something it's not nice. It's like the river Styx is not a nice place to
Like
to
that's
go.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that the sunset in the back is so beautiful. Like,
Mhm.
and the three little figures, I'm struggling with how small they are. Meaning,
Oh.
It's
Go ahead.
because Hades is a god and they're
Mhm.
mortals.
Yes. So the size difference. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
but it's almost like, so there's that river Styx, and before you cross into the river cross over it or under it or through it or whatever, it's like this desolate, like cracked, parched earth. And then you get over to these beautiful green hills with this gorgeous freaking sunset.
Mhm.
Like, I guess that's the rebirth and transformation and whatnot.
So Styx means shuddering, like I'm shuddering before
Mhm.
you, and expresses loathing of death. According to Encyclopedia Britannica,
Yeah, I mean,
Britannica.com.
yeah, it's something like, yeah, it's that, it's, yeah, yeah.
There is
And
a legend that Alexander the Great was poisoned by Styx water, and the gods swear by the water of the Styx as their most binding oath. I have to go there, but anyway, that was a little bit more.
And then we've got the child with the flower. We've got the woman with the crown, which seems, I would think the man would have the crown since typically that's the king, the emperor king. And then I can't see what the man has.
I believe he's got some kind of urn or some kind of,
It almost blends in the background, doesn't it?
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
but
Yeah.
it's almost like on this side is Tartarus, and on that side is the Elysian Fields,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the idea is that if you are heroic and you die, you go to the Elysian Fields, which is like eternal summer, kind of like Summerlands. You know, you hear Wiccans talk about the Summerlands. It's kind of like that, versus Tartarus, which is basically like the Hebrew concept of Sheol, where it's just kind of everybody's a shade, and you just kind of wander around as a shade. And that's Tartarus is what Hades is actually associated with. What death
What's
is.
Tartarus mean?
It's the underworld.
Tartarus, like tartar sauce?
Yeah, but that's the name of the underworld.
Tartar sauce, Tartarus, I like it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, is that what I'm hearing? Tartarus, like tartar
Tartarus.
sauce?
Yeah, yeah, Tartarus. Yeah.
And that's the name of the underworld?
Yes, the Greek underworld. I'm sure you studied this at Keystone many, many, many decades ago.
Nope.
Oh,
I mean, somebody else might have, but I didn't go there from kindergarten on. So that might have been a different year than what I was there.
oh.
Yeah, Hades, the look of Hades kind of is, it's the thing on his face that's bothering me that makes me feel uncomfortable. But other than that, I'm loving that card.
Yeah, and I think the thing on his face is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable.
Like it it
Yeah.
definitely makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Because he kind of got in, he kind of got cheated too, because his, Zeus is his younger brother, and Zeus got to be the king of heaven, right? And he basically got stuck in the underworld, so it's,
Well, if you're going to get stuck in the underworld, you might as well be the king.
and
Yeah.
he ends up getting a beautiful wife, but only for part of the year. And yeah, he kind of got the raw end a lot. But here we have, this is a form of the washer at the ford. She's a form of Morgan Le Fay, an older form of Morgan Le Fay. Before Morgan Le Fay was depicted as human in the Arthurian stories, she was depicted as a goddess. And this is one of those forms. And the idea is that she cleanses the wounds of the dead and the dying on Avalon, and then they are essentially reborn. But I like that. I like that image. I think it's kind of cool.
Yes, it's her face is, but like, and then so there's that bird up there.
Yeah.
I can't tell what type of bird
I
that is.
believe it's a raven.
I'm not agreeing with you on that, but we can agree to disagree because
Or a vulture. It might be a vulture.
it might be a raven now that I'm looking at it. He just has a lot of whitish on him. And then the three things in the back, are they?
They look
dogs?
like wolfhounds.
Wolfhounds.
Yeah.
Is a wolfhound different than a wolf?
Yeah.
Mhm. Aren't those, yeah, wolfhounds are what? A company, Morgan Le Fay?
I think so.
I believe so.
Yeah. But this is a kind of a more positive image of death, because the idea is that with death comes healing or relief or release.
And this is the Arthurian deck?
Yeah. I need to make the nut deck, right? Nut.
You could put it on Kickstarter.
No one but like, actually, I know nut. Everyone would buy your deck. I know.
I'm liking this next card a lot too.
So this one I can't I'm pretty sure I read this, but it was a while ago, and as far as the specific,
What deck?
this is the Druidcraft.
So the snake, the vessels, the raven bird, that's, what is that, Stonehenge over there in the background?
Standing stones, sure. Yeah.
The cauldron, and then all her talismans, and the red, we've got the red again as part of the robe, but also with the red, we've got the green. I'm interested in what the face is in the tree bark. There's a lot going on in this card. Oh, well, the scythe around her neck, that's not a talisman, that's her.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful card, y'all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, it looks very Shakespearean to me,
Mhm.
like in a way, like the Three Witches in Macbeth kind of.
yeah, most definitely.
Mhm.
That's what I thought of when I got
Like,
to.
like she's gonna tell you something that's gonna be life changing, but it's not gonna be necessarily. You're gonna think maybe it's what you want to hear, but it's gonna have implications that
It's going to be painful.
right.
And that's exactly the Shakespearean part, is exactly what I thought of.
Right.
Yeah.
It just looks so Shakespearean to me. And I mean, and Shakespeare, of course, was drawing upon, old, particularly in something like Macbeth, is drawing
Mhm.
upon old, British, British Isles
Oh, yeah.
mythology and narrative.
And what deck is this?
Druidcraft, yeah. We're about to get into some fun ones here in a minute.
Okay.
Well, before we go, do you know of anything with the vessels behind her or the face in the tree? Or I know we've looked at snakes before, but can we just kind of recap that?
Okay. The snake, I mean, is all about rebirth, because of course it sheds its skin. The vessels, I don't know.
Because there's the big cauldron, but then she's got two vessels behind her with a person on one, and I can't see what's on the other. And they're almost sitting on like the knob of the tree that happens
a
to be a face. And I'm thinking, well, does that have something to do with Green Man or
Well,
like?
right, maybe, yeah. I mean, the Druids and the Celts, of course, believe that there are the spirits inhabit the trees and so on and so forth. And if it is, I mean, you can look at the snake, you can look at the face in the tree and so forth. You can look at those as sexual emblems as well. You know, with that potency of rebirth, there's this greenery hanging down here too. That could be something. That could be those could be herbs or something hanging down.
Mhm. Get that beautiful cauldron.
Oh my God, Denise, I forgot to go ask them about that cauldron I saw down the street and I haven't seen it since.
Oh, okay.
I am so sorry.
That's okay. I appreciate you looking out for
I'll
it,
call,
though.
I'll call them tomorrow or go by
Yeah,
there.
whenever you have a chance. I appreciate it.
I'm sure I get that gnawing feeling it's gone.
Mm.
Okay, is this Tabula Mundi?
Yes, it is.
Whoa,
And you
okay.
did you put the one that goes with Tabula Mundi? Is that the center one?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, that center one I like it.
Yeah, and I mean, she's playing with, you know, the double helix of
Mhm.
of DNA, you know, the spiral, all sorts of
Mhm.
spirals there, sperm. I don't know what else
Yeah,
to, I mean,
yeah, there's very
you know,
sperm-like.
yeah, this fish here
Tadpoles.
did you all read up anything on the fish? Because the only thing I can think of is that that's a Christian reference
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
the,
no, nothing on the fish.
yeah.
Mhm.
But
But
here,
the spirals in the Tabula Mundi one almost remind me, Kurt, because it looks like they have seeds in them of pomegranates.
they're tadpoles.
Mhm.
Those are tadpoles?
Those are tadpole or baby snakes. Baby
Mhm.
snakes.
Baby snakes. The side. What's that red thing behind the eagle's wing is that a boat back there in the water? Right, go down.
Yes, it probably is. It is
Yeah.
probably an Egyptian what a water burial.
And is this eagle part scorpion snake reptile thing?
Yes, so
Mhm.
it's got the scorpion's tail, it's got the snake body, and it's got the eagle, and these are all aspects of death or of Scorpio, the sign. So and it's all about the progression of the into the release of the energy.
Mm.
Yeah.
So hold that thought. And then the Egyptian pyramids and the astrology in the sky that is connected to, I don't know what on the pyramid with the lines, with the tracks.
What that okay, so you have the constellation, and what you're seeing is you're actually seeing inside the pyramid. Okay. That's what that's what it looks like inside the pyramid, like
Yeah.
inside the chambers.
What do you mean it looks like that?
That is what it looks like inside
Like,
the
you mean
pyramid.
the way it's arranged.
Yeah, like there's
Like
actually
rooms?
if you yeah, this is what there are rooms like this up inside the pyramids. Like, I mean,
Rooms like what? I'm missing what you're saying.
like these are chambers in the pyramid. Like if you were to do a cutaway of the pyramid, this is what it would look like.
I am so okay, we'll just go with that. I'm not seeing it, but okay. I'm going with it for right now.
So this right here.
What do the lines connecting the constellations have to do with it?
In other words, the placement of everything inside the pyramid is very deliberately
Mimicking the constellation.
connecting to these constellations. Yes.
Okay.
And what
Um,
am I supposed to be seeing inside the cutaway?
It's just an acknowledgement that here's a chamber
That-
here.
That little bitty black thing in the middle?
Yeah, these are chambers inside the pyramid, right?
I'm just having a real hard time seeing.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's minute detail. I mean, you're not, but the
That's
idea is that, the pyramids were set up very deliberately as an assurance of afterlife, relating to the Pleiades and, other stars. And actually the three pyramids, the three great pyramids, they are in line perfectly with Orion's belt. But that gets back into the whole thing of, basically assurance of passage into the afterlife. And it's also kind of, in a way, it's like you can make all the preparations, you can, but if you don't, if you're not ready to go in the moment, then what good does the preparations do you? I don't know. There are different ways to look at that, because I mean, there are traditions where you essentially practice for the moment of death throughout your life, that you practice certain spiritual practices and everything. So that the idea is that when one dies, that for most of us, death is so traumatic that, our consciousnesses take the path of least resistance. So it's whatever the big joke is, if you're dying and you say, oh shit, well, you'll come back as a dung beetle, because your consciousness takes the path of least resistance. And if you're thinking about a pile of shit when you die, you might come back and live in a pile of shit.
You have a higher mind.
But the idea is that if you've been preparing for death, essentially, that even in a traumatic situation, your mind is going to go back to the training that you have undergone, So it's like, for example, if you've seen the Ben Kingsley movie, Gandhi, right, where Ben Kingsley plays Gandhi and he gets shot at the beginning of the movie, and he says, oh God, oh God. Well, what he actually said was Rama. He chanted the name of Rama. And the idea is that if you have the name of God on your lips when you die, you go to God, because that's where your consciousness was as you are crossing over, right?
On the middle one, is that Rosetta Stone?
Rosetta, yeah.
There's that round thing behind death.
Uh-huh.
It's like yellowish.
I think that's
a tissue.
I think that's an island of some sort.
An island, and the stones on it, are those like Stonehenge?
I think. I mean, there's two. Yeah.
There's two towers of some kind.
Yeah.
Towers looking building.
Towers. Yeah, they have windows and a door. Interesting, Denise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this is Pollock on the right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, she's got a lot of things we've seen. A lot of emblems that we've seen in some of the other cards.
Right.
The roses. We're going to see the sarcophagus and some of the other cards. It's got a sun here.
Now, what is that? Oh, okay, that little flower head thing. What is off of the rainbow stripes in the back?
Let me get
This is
more.
head.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is.
What sure what is?
The flower coming off of the
So do you see, Denise, how it's attached to the rainbow lines and everything coming out of the box? So I
Yes.
missed whatever y'all said about that. So I'm just gonna throw out what I think because I didn't even
Is
hear
that a-
y'all.
Is that a spirit rising?
I was thinking, no, that it's like ascension through this rebirth, like it's
Okay.
you and the rebirth, like once you get through that death, that you become this beautiful new flower like a butterfly. And do you see how it's like floating upward,
Yeah,
more spiritual than like so relating to death of ego, whatever?
yeah.
That's my 2 cents on that. I still like Tabula Mundi, Kurt.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
so Ariadne, she of course gives the ball of yarn to Theseus, and he's able to find his way through the labyrinth to kill the Minotaur and then get back out. And the complication here is, of course, the Minotaur is her brother.
Mm.
And she has to kill her brother?
She takes a part in the killing of her brother.
Mm.
You know, and she knows that it's necessary because her father's a despot and her brother is essentially in absolute misery, you know, being this half bull, half human creature that subsists on humans, you know.
Right. Mm.
And then, of course, we have a sarcophagus here, and then the spirit of the woman
Mhm.
whose body is in there.
And what 2 decks are those?
This is the Chrysalis. This one is the Journeys into Egypt.
Okay.
And then this one is Good, the
Yep.
Good Tarot. And I like that she, you know, she's blowing on the little flowers and they're going in all the different directions.
Mhm. And that's the child. with
Oh,
the
you're right. You're
flowers.
right. Yeah, 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 definitely.
Mhm.
The child
That
is
makes
not
sense.
the child is not afraid of
Mm-mm.
death.
Mm-mm.
So it's almost as if death only has a scary face, if you will, if we come at death um, in a space of ego.
Because if you're not in a space of ego, you can't hold fear.
Right. We're not whole fight. We're not well, we're not
So
We're
go
not
back
fighting,
to
we're
the
not in resistance.
go back to the good one real quick. So you said that, so I'm just throwing in, I'm not trying to give you a hard time or anything, but like you said, that was a flower. So I originally saw it because I still don't see a flower. I see it as like a little sprite of some sort, if you will.
Mhm.
Like I see a little being there. But again, and even like, yeah, I don't know. I'll have to like look at that closer because I have that one. But like, so I'm yeah.
Well, I mean, it could very well have this, the spirit of, if it is a flower, the spirit of the flower.
It
Yeah,
looks like
Right.
phoenix.
yeah, I don't know what it
What did
But
you
I'm
say?
not giving you a hard time or anything.
I was saying it looks like a phoenix because how CJ was saying that it looks like a little, like a fairy or something,
Uh-huh.
but I
Mhm.
see like
You see
embers
the
of
wings?
fire. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see wings. So I see it as a phoenix. And you know how like Phoenix, they do the whole
Rebirth.
ashes and rebirth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
Oh,
I can
okay,
see
okay,
that.
I
I
can
can
kinda see.
totally see that.
Okay, I can kind of see that here.
Yeah.
And then off of that are all the sparks that go out into this child's reality from that. All those embers that are floating away from that.
I almost want I want to enlarge it. I'm like, oh, it won't enlarge. I'm wondering like, God, let's make it bigger. Yeah.
It is a phoenix. See, you can see it now.
Yeah. Now you can see it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah, you can definitely see it now.
Thank you. Thank you. That helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angel.
You're welcome.
So part of your screen, I think on the very edge, is it cutting off or am I just, there we go. Oh,
Yeah.
no,
Wait,
shrink it down a little. There you go.
there you
Oh,
go. Oh, you know what you need to do, Kurt? Down on the bottom of your screen, you need to take the bar and move it
to the left.
to the left.
Mhm.
To the
I'm
left.
I'm not gonna mess with that.
Yeah, just take it and drag it to the left.
Because I don't have a mouse and I don't want to, I want to be able to,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm afraid all of a
Can
sudden
you,
it
but can
disappear.
you unzoom then? Oh, you can't because it needs to be moved to the left. Okay. Oh, look, I think you did it.
Yeah. Yeah, right? It kind of happened.
You drug it to the left, Kurt. Thank you.
Yay.
Okay. So
Mm.
here, thoughts on this one?
Mysterious, magical,
Like this sort of like all of the sort of cosmic, they off outside of the death figure, it reminds me of like it's like the universe, right? Stars, galaxies merging back into the cosmos.
It reminds me of there's a story in the Bhagavad Purana where baby Krishna's eating dirt and his foster mother gets upset with him. She's like, don't eat dirt. What are you eating dirt? And she opens up his mouth and she can see the entire universe, including her, and opening up his mouth.
Uh-huh.
You know, she sees all of the cosmos, and then yeah.
That yes, I love that this is one of my favorite cards. I think it's such a beautiful representation of death. And that we go back to that which, you know, are elements, you know, the various different kinds of, you know, we're carbon and we're we're all of these different types of atoms, and we reemerge into that.
it's one of the more beautiful death cards that we have.
I think so. I agree, CJ, and it feels peaceful. There's a real peace there, even though there's all of this
I
action.
love those trees that are inside and then outside at the bottom left corner. Like it takes me like, so it's almost when I go out in nature, whether it's on my walk and run or whatever, it's so grounding that I can be in that non-sunshine energy place and I can come back and be in a more sunshine energy place. So it's almost like I died and rebirthed myself. So like those trees also with the unity, like that just takes me to that place where, yeah. And I guess with those birch trees on that first card we saw, I'd have to look up what these are. Would these be pine trees or what?
Those look like pine to me.
So
Yeah.
in the next one from the Book of Shadows, those are pine trees too.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I'm thinking
this,
there might be a significance to the pine trees.
well, the pine trees are perennial. They don't, I mean, that's the whole thing about the Christmas tree.
Right.
The pine is it doesn't, it's always green,
Yeah.
right? But what I like about it, Death is Yule, is, of course, Yule is about the death of the sacrificial king, is
Yeah.
that we're most familiar with is Jesus, right? In the rebirth, right? The death in the rebirth, and so you have the the rebirth of the sacrificial king. So you have the um the elements of death, i.e., the ice on the ground and everything like that. But you also have the sun coming up in the background. You have the old sacrificial king here passing off to
The
the
Holly King and the
Holly King and the Oak King, right?
Oak King.
Yeah. And then you have the Ostara rabbit
Mm-hmm.
over here. It's like, hey, spring's
Birth.
on the corner.
Fertility.
Yeah.
And what is he passing off to who?
Well, it's so he's dying, right? And he's being born.
What's in between their hands?
I'm
Just whatever.
What would that be, Denise?
I know there's a symbolic passing. There's like the fight and they pass something
Yeah.
symbolically, but I can't remember exactly what the object is.
Let me see real quick if I can.
And who is that, Denise? That's not Yule, but the younger guy with the bow?
That's the Oak King, right?
The Oak King?
Yeah, so the Holly King is the one that's dying at the winter solstice, and the Oak King will be fully born at the summer solstice. So I actually went to a ritual. I went to a Yule ritual over at the First Unitarian Universalists, and they did a reenactment of this very thing, right? They acted this out as part of the ritual. The Oak King and the Holly King battling it out. They even had a duel. It was fun drama to see it, right? It was really fun to see it.
And this is as above, correct, you guys?
Mhm.
Correct, yeah.
Trying to keep that in my mind, and then so below.
And look at that, CJ.
I know I've had some really depressing real estate moments in the last 24 hours. So like, I don't want to really talk about that, but yes, look at that. And then I'm also thinking something else, and we just don't want to talk about that either right now.
Okay.
But yes, I get it all. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to find, of course, when I'm looking for it, I can't find it.
It looks like this is a natural break time while you're looking, because now my
Here we go,
bladder.
here we go.
Oh, you found it? Okay.
Yeah, found it. So Yule is a joyous celebration of the return of light. Yule is also a celebration of faith. Life has not actually begun. Its return. So it's an act of faith and belief, and it will return. It is nearly impossible to pinpoint the exact moment that one thing ends and another begins. Nearly impossible, but the moment does not. But that moment does exist. This card shows the moment when the dead Holly King hands over the rulership to the Oak King. Okay. On the longest night of the year, the Great Mother gives birth to the sun god, and pagans celebrate the return of light to the world. At Samhain, the god dies and takes the light with him. After the winter solstice, the sun begins to return, so does the god, in the form of a baby. Yule is a joyous celebration, the return of light, life, and warmth. And that's all it says. It doesn't
Say,
say what
that
the
must represent then the kingdom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
But what is
rulership.
it? It looks like a bunch of sticks to me.
It
Are
does.
they
with
oak?
leaves.
Are they oak? Are they like oak branches, maybe?
it could be. I mean, yeah.
Beautiful. Look, I love those two decks, y'all.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. The one in the middle.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
I
the
knew you were gonna
little
like that one.
cats. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Oh,
And then the phoenix.
Mhm.
I know.
Transformation. Look at that transition and liberation. We're supposed to have, aren't there swarms of cicadas that are coming up from the ground? Like they're emerging, like they were saying, I read something in the
Get off the
somewhere.
conspiracy theories. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Let me
I
put
just
my,
remember them growing up. They were everywhere.
well, there's literally this year, there are like in 17 states. There, because they take, or is it 17 states? It takes, how many years are they in the ground? They're in
Oh,
the
I
ground
don't know.
for a long time.
Oh wow, I just noticed in that cat,
Yeah.
And
What?
cats,
it's all the
all the
live-
lives, all the lives.
Yeah.
Isn't that awesome? I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have my book card for Shadowscape.
Shadowscape. Okay.
It is said that the mute swan is silent its entire life. Upon the threshold of death, it sings one achingly beautiful song that steals the final breath from its chest, and then it expires upon that ultimate sigh. It is the most heartbreakingly wrenching song of ending. But the song of the phoenix, the song of the swan cannot compare. When the phoenix sees death beckoning, she lifts her voice in a tragic song of pain, of rending, of sorrow, that yet cannot mask the most intense joy. For she knows that as the flames lick at her heart, the heat is quickening the egg in which her successor sleeps. Her death flame is its life spark. One is linked inextricably to the other. And thus she was tied to her predecessor, and she hers, and she hers to the beginning of time. She sits in her deathbed upon her nest as she submits to the inevitable hand of fate. As the fire burns, searing hot and white, she spreads her wings and breathes her final song of expiration. Meaning, closing the door to the past and opening a new one, going through transition, changing status, shedding the old and excess, bowing to inexorable forces and sweeping changes. The old must be set aside and burned away to make way for the new. The ancient story of the phoenix is one that is echoed and repeated in dozens of cultures. She is death and rebirth and life encapsulated in a single symbol. Irises are associated with death, as Iris was the Greek goddess of the rainbow, which she used to travel down to earth with messages from the gods and to transport women's souls to the underworld. Deadly nightshade is a highly poisonous plant, a symbol of deception, danger, and death. And sumac in the Victorian language of flowers means I shall survive the change. So I'm going to interrupt myself for a second there. Remember, and I don't know if Denise is here with us right now, but remember the Rachel Pollack deck, the rainbow, and what we thought was a soul or a flower. So did you hear that? It says, irises are associated with death, as Iris was the Greek goddess of the rainbow, which she used to travel down to earth with messages from the gods and to transport women's souls to the underworld. So that's what's going on. That's what's on Rachel Pollack's card there. Then I'm going into the pages where she talks about her sketchbook, and she says, she always thought of the death card in tarot as a phoenix, to emphasize being not death as an ending, but as a cleansing, a renewal, a necessary transition, not nightmare phantom death who hides in the shadows, skull-faced, wearing a black robe and bearing a scythe. Such a stereotype not conducive to the other subtleties and layers of meaning that this piece needed to encapsulate. Phoenix is the perfect summary of the thoughts that she had. Blazing death, beautiful transition, necessary component in the grand scheme of the cycles of the world. The whole of it was a reiteration of a concept that seemed to be slowly threading its way through the entire series of images, meaning her whole deck, the interconnected web of all creation. The language of flowers was tradition that came into popularity during the Victorian era, though the concept was one rooted in antiquity, in which arrangements of different flowers and colors were used to convey messages. And then she talks about, and I'm trying to look on the card there, which I guess it's down at the bottom right, you guys. I don't know, help me out. The phoenix egg smolders like an ember, the next phoenix awaiting its chance to live. When the old one self-immolates upon the nest, fiery potential burning with a fierce intensity and a will to live, life tied to death, a dependent cycle. And she wrote at the bottom in handwriting, because these are pictures out of her sketchbook, I will survive the change.
I have a dear friend who was essentially selling her childhood home in DC. And she moved all of her stuff, all of the stuff into storage. So it was her mother's house. She grew up there. And it was just a painstaking process, but it was necessary, right? So she had to essentially declutter, move all of her stuff. The house is being listed, all of this. And I pulled, remember the last time I pulled a Therapet card?
Yeah.
A little Therapet card. So I pulled a Therapet card for her. And it basically was an image of a deer, like a doe, that said, you will survive this.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So you will survive the transformation. That's such an important thing to carry.
Well,
I love
if
that.
you carry that with you, doesn't that help alleviate some of that fear? Wow. Hello, CJ. Hello.
All right. These are really fun. I love how you pulled in
Amber's picture.
Amber's picture. That's great.
Yeah,
That's a fun. That's
I
a
love
fun.
B. Arthur as death. Yeah, and then what you were saying earlier, Denise, about a change that's where you can't go back. That's Anakin into Darth Vader. I mean, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
So, and
Well, and that sort of that belief that you can't go or you can't continue to transform.
yeah.
Yeah.
But ultimately his transformation into Darth Vader was good because it brought balance to the Force.
Yeah.
I mean, so there were greater forces
Mhm.
at work than,
Mhm.
simply. I mean, that's like a very nerdy, discussion on
Mhm.
Star Wars, but
I love it.
Okay.
but yeah. Um, and then of course the whole Star Wars saga then becomes about the redemption of Darth Vader, becomes about the redemption of Anakin Skywalker.
Mhm.
Um, you know, uh, then he has this whiny ass grandson.
Well, this is why I think it's so important about getting, seeing him in that. We were talking about the total context
Yeah,
of
yeah,
one's passing and
yeah.
being able to see. Yeah, I don't know if you're Harry Potter fans, or if you watched any of the Harry Potter films or watched
No, but I
you know,
read
what,
some of the books.
well, you read the books, and so this idea of trying to redeem Severus Snape,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And as you progress through the series, you begin to understand. You get the fuller picture,
Hmm.
right? Where it appears one way, and not that it appears. I mean, it's not that it's an incorrect appearance. It's just not enough information to
Right.
understand it and the totality of it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you? What if we just walked through life that way all the time? Remembering that what we see and encounter is only a small piece of anything.
But you know that a lot of people say that of the great masters is that they can actually see everything in the totality, you know,
Mm,
um, or at least have that empathy turned up all the time,
mhm.
you know.
Denise made a remark earlier because I wrote it down. She said, when you see all of the all, it's deep, deep perspective. So is this Wildwood?
Yeah, the Raven, the journey,
Man, Denise, I love that deck.
That's a beautiful deck.
and that's a
Look
great,
at that.
yeah.
So
I
I'm
mean,
trying to figure out, oh, it's pulling the last bit of like
mhm,
the skin
yep,
off of the skull.
yep.
Mhm,
Are those now? I think those are ravens, are they
I do
not?
too. Yeah,
mhm.
that's what I thought.
So I didn't think they're vultures.
No, they're ravens. Those are not
Okay.
vultures. Yeah, no. And so you have the whole mystical aspect with the raven, but you also have the reality is that ultimately our bodies, what we hold to be so dear, this particular snippet of time and space, that we hold to be so dear with the identities that we embody and inhabit and do hold dear in the present moment. But that's going to be bird food or
Yeah.
mice food. Like the mice are just waiting for me to die. They're gonna swarm in and
They
like
literally are. They're not going to swarm in. Oh,
that's like that's not funny, Daddy.
time and space, present moment, bird food. So another
CJ kept looking in my kitchen and she was like, I've seen 4 of them since I've gotten here, and they're all different ones.
um so when we're talking about what we're holding, we're revering so much in this present moment, our identity tied to our physical body in this time and space in the present moment becomes bird food later. But we're also talking like that's the whole, like in other words, we need to let that shit go
Yeah,
in
yeah,
order to achieve our higher calling, our higher purpose, our higher potential, in order to integrate into this, I don't know what you will, spirituality that we're seeking.
well, I mean, if you think about somebody like Viktor Frankl, right? I don't
Mhm.
know why I'm talking about Viktor Frankl right now, but the idea is that, you know, he survived the Holocaust. Like he saw like the worst of the worst of everything. And a lot of people who came out of that, the way that how they reconciled it was they became total atheists. They just, you know, they just said that there is no way that there could be, you know,
Right.
anything, you know. But he actually went the opposite direction. He said that what got him through um the Holocaust was his capacity to love. He was able to find love in somehow in every day, every time, you know, that he, you know, even amidst all of that tragedy, you know.
Wow.
And how what the connection that I'm making is that once we confront death in this card, and we ultimately confront mortality, you know, with this card, what remains is the question that CJ is asking is, why the hell am I here? You know, it's like if this is all, you know, if this is all going to go away, which it is, I mean, we all know that, then why am I here? That begins to be answered in the next card.
Temperance.
That begins to be worked out, particularly if you call the card art. If you take
That's why I was interested in that.
if
Yeah.
you take Aleister Crowley's view and you call the card art, which it works for temperance too, but if but specifically if you call the card art, in the Tabula Mundi deck for that card has a woman shooting a bow, which is a very, very deliberate action, you know. So it's like, you know, okay, we are experiencing death here now. It's like, now that we've reconciled the fact that, you know, our ego is temporary, all this is temporary, you know, what are we going to do that is sacred, that's lasting, that's, you know, that's good, that's beautiful, that represents who and what we actually are? We're going to create something beautiful, something that represents that, something that affects that kind of change in the world. So, and that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, as you were saying this, and as we were kind of talking about the different aspects of this card, the last card here in your gallery, I was thinking about Sister Helen Prejean.
Oh yes, yeah.
And the kind of work that she does, right, with death row inmates and helping them to come to reconciliation. And as you were talking about Viktor Frankl, who saw love and beauty, and the degree to which people who can work with, out of a sense of creating a kind of state of grace, or helping them to have some reconciliation with the acts that they committed, right? And I mean, there's something incredibly powerful. I mean, she a kind of priestess that aids along that journey towards transformation, especially if they can reach a kind of reconciliation where where not all, but some and many will say, yes, indeed, I did these things. And for this, I am terribly, terribly, terribly sorry, you know. And I think that is part of the opportunity we have, all of us. Not to that, you know, that's a pretty extreme example, but I think that's that idea that if we, you know, because there used to be NPR had a This I Believe series, which was sort of a series based on people establishing values. And like, it was based on a series that I think emerged in the 60s, the early 60s, and it ran for a while. They stopped it and they brought it back, ran for a while, and then they stopped it. But they kept the archive available online for anybody. You can just look it up, just Google it. But I remember having students for homework read Sister Prejean's statement, This I Believe, and she was talking about her work with death row inmates. And this was when I was teaching at Texas Lutheran University. And so a lot of the students, any student really was, you know, whether it was there or elsewhere, it just, they had to really pause. It's like, how would you, they shuddered, right? There's the river Styx, that
Yeah.
shuddering at that idea that anyone would want to work with these people or those people or what have you, the deep grace and sense of love that has to come, that place you have to pull from. It was a fascinating conversation, and a lot of students, I mean, walked away after that conversation having to really think about them. You know, what does it mean to be Christian? What does it mean to walk in Christian faith? What does it mean to do all of these kinds of things? And so it really, it for some of them shook them to their core a little bit, which I think such things, I think that's a good thing, right? It got them to look at their value set, and to say, well, what is it that I really do believe? Is it truly in alignment with? And if it's out of alignment, what do they need to do to get it more in alignment with, right? So I think this journey through the death card and understanding all of these things has really been it has been transformative, right? It makes me kind of, helps me to weave together. I saw something earlier today, which was really interesting. There's a little taqueria right around the corner from where I live. It's actually more than a taqueria. It's a small restaurant, Mexican restaurant, and which is not unusual for the way they run Mexican restaurants here in San Antonio. Is they have the wait staff are all women, and the folks who cook in the back are men. Right? In Mexico, I think it's all men, you know, in the front, in the back of the house, right? But there was a gentleman, a man who came in off the street. He was very, very thin. His hair was very, very long. He was very disheveled. And it was pretty clear to me that he was probably schizophrenic, living on the streets. Right. And so he came in and he was like, food, I need food, you know. And so I watched this whole kind of exchange around this individual who came into the restaurant, and how these women were going to handle this. And they basically told him, we told you yesterday, we can't give you you know, you can't stay here, whatever. But sure enough, they gave them something to eat and something to drink. Right. So they packaged that for him and sent him on his way. And moments like that for me, when I witness anything like that, it always makes me think about who I am, what are my values, what would I do? Because I was getting ready to go in and purchase whatever food I needed to be able to make sure that he had food. Right. And they did. They set a boundary with him. They gave him food. They gave him drink. And they said, now you have to go. Because this was a person whose sense of reality in that moment was very, you could see him going in and moving in and out of sort of a lucid state. Then I looked out the window and I could see him in full on engagement with whomever, whatever he sees in his mind's eye in that moment, right? Who he's truly sort of engaging with. And so this is how I knew that this was a person I already suspected, but I saw that as well. And I said, this is a person who is struggling with schizophrenia, most likely, or some kind of schizoid sort of set of mental challenges, mental health issues. And it does. Those are the moments that I think that we need to pay attention to the most rather than to ignore, for me, right? Because it gives me an opportunity. It's a mirror back to me, isn't it? Right? It's a mirror back to me that allows me to sit back and think, what do you think about this? Death has been on my mind for a while now, since we were coming up to this card. And this card, more than any of the other cards, seems to have more of an imprint on me. And I think because of it ultimately requires, I think, some sort of really deep reflection. You know, it requires it. They all require deep reflection. I'm not saying that they don't, but this one is hitting. Maybe it's because I'm 55. You know, I'm past midlife technically, although I keep saying I'm in midlife. I'm in midlife. Well, unless I'm going to be 100 and, 10 years old.
You are.
I might. It's possible. My maternal grandmother lived to be 100. It's possible. But I mean, I think that may be it. There's a point in life in which you really, I wasn't thinking about this stuff when I was 20. Certainly I wasn't. Even in my 30s. I don't think I even started to until my 40s when my parents, I know CJ, you lost your mother much younger.
Yeah, my dad in 3rd grade.
Your dad even younger than that. And so different folks have different experiences. And I guess mine were sort of, I was in my 40s when both of my parents passed away. But my sister was older, right? My sister is the oldest. She's 14 years older than I am. So she was, further along. And so the loss was very profound for her, but she has a very particular kind of faith, and she leans on that quite a bit. She is a lot like the Hierophant to some extent, right? She has that kind of level of faith that she really leans on. But I don't know really what I'm, it's not like I want to, it's like I have nothing profound to say. This is not about that, but I think all of these things, all of these experiences I've had over these last 36 hours and really in the last 24 hours are really kind of working they're working on me in a way where this is going to stick with me for a good long while, right? As I move through it. And I think that all of the lessons that this card suggests and teaches and represents, is, how do you then, I mean, I think for those of us who are deepening our understanding of tarot for ourselves, but for those of us who are also wanting to then work with others to help them by reading for others, how do we help somebody when this card appears, right? How do we story that to them? How do we talk to them about that, about these ideas and concepts in a way that they can hear us? Which goes back to one of the things I think that Pollock does so well in Tarot Wisdom, which is like, was it Tarot Wisdom? I think it was Tarot Wisdom. She's like, how do we then talk to others when we're reading for others about what this card essentially symbolizes?
And that was where you bring in that piece you mentioned earlier. You have to be soft about it.
Be soft.
Potentially, depending on the person, I guess.
Right. Some people need a little more direct.
Yeah.
If you know your person well. So anyway, I'm sorry for sort of like going on and on and on, but it's been a day of really sort of significant experiences where I feel like they're very much being tempered by this card and the lessons around this card. And that's all.
I like it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop our recording.
Okay.